blood that she lost all the time would have made her weak. She wasn't allowed to be touched. Can we just get hold of that for a minute? For 12 years, she hadn't had a hug, or a stroke on the shoulder, or whatever the New Testament Fertile Crescent equivalent of a handshake was. She hadn't been touched. Imagine that level of social isolation and discord. Imagine what that feels. You're in pain. You're weak. You're seen in some way as judged by God. You're on the periphery of society, and no one can touch you. That had been her lived experience all the way through this little girl's happy, healthy life. And finally, I would say, I'm just going to use this word, adored and abandoned. Yeah. Is it one or two? One? So her experience is like the mirror image of the little girls. Total centre of the village. Daddy, somebody that everybody wants to be in with. Total on the edge of society. Extraordinary, actually, that she managed somehow to stay alive. Okay, so let's go back into the story proper, the story that we have in front of us here. So interesting in the way the story appears. You've got the narrative. Jesus turns up on the side of the lake. Jairus comes, prostrates himself in front of Jesus. Jesus says, okay then, let's go. You then get the story of the hemorrhaging woman. Jesus makes the high status man, and therefore the high status little girl, wait for the no status woman. He pauses, business as usual. He said, woe to status, woe to what is seen as important, woe to, I've got an agenda here and I'm very busy, and slows everything down for the lady that has no kudos at all and actually appears to be invisible. If you look at Jairus' request, you've got this, how would I put it, almost a formal request of Jesus, a begging here from Jairus. Over here, you've got a sneak, yeah? All she can do, she doesn't admit to her need, she doesn't own the request, she simply is convinced that Jesus has the answer that she needs, and she sneaks up beside him, so low in her self-esteem that she wouldn't dare to bother him to ask him to grab what she knows she needs out of him. Jesus makes all this wait on this. Now, I just want to unpick a little bit of some bits that we might miss in the Greek. Verse 28. She thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed. The sense is that this woman is having to give herself Dutch courage. She's having to say it to herself. She's not used to being in crowds. She's being incredibly brave to risk this. If people recognized her, they would literally be going, ugh, what are you doing here? But she has such hope that she says to herself, like she's repeating it under her breath, it's all worth it. It's worth the rejection and the potential vilification if I could just get to touch his robe. Yeah? All her hope is focused on that one gesture because she has utter faith in him. Now, when it says touch his robe, Partly it's so that she wouldn't make him unclean, but probably she's talking about the outer robe, the prayer tassels that every Jewish man would have worn on his outer shawl to show that he was part of the Jewish community. And she is just pushing herself as far as she can push to get to the edge of the edge of the edge of where the healing might flow. So she's having to pep herself up to give herself courage to do this. And the most that she can try, that she can afford, she can't take his conscious attention, is just to touch the edge of the edge of the edge of him, believing with all her heart that she will be healed. Verse 29, something you might be interested in. Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been, the word that we have here, healed of her terrible condition, the word is sozoed. Sozoed. Healed, saved, delivered, made right. Yeah? She knew immediately that it had all happened for her as soon as she touched him. Okay? Verse 30, and just because I think these Greek, the nuances of the Greek words are so interesting. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out of him, so he turned around to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" Now, the sense in the Greek is that this healing power is coursing around Jesus all the time, and almost like he is consciously aware of it. There is power going on around him. The power, the Bible says, of an indestructible life. It's going round him, and it's going round him, and it's going round him. And the sense in the Greek is that he was physically aware that some of that power that keeps going round and round and round had gone out to make somebody else better. Yeah? So he had a sensory experience. She just touched the end of his cardi like this, but he had a sensory experience in there that said that the power of an indestructible life that was in him had gone out. So he had a physical reaction to her, even though she was totally discreet and no self-esteem, no healthy self-image. She wouldn't have taken his time for the world. He knew something had happened. Isn't that interesting? Then, why do we think this poor lady had such an embarrassing medical problem? She'd been an outcast all these years. Why do you think he draws attention to her? It says that she came to his feet trembling and in fear. She'd been exposed. She'd done the whole thing as discreetly as she could do it. And then, like a bloke, he says, "Who did this?" And she's exposed. Why do you think he did that? Good. He wants to elevate her. He wants the whole community to see that the girl who was an outcast is now honoured. The one who is unclean is now sozoed and well. And he even commends her. Why does he say that she was healed? Did he just say, "Oh, honey, it was your lucky day, I was on form"? No, he says it's your faith in me that has healed you. He commends her. He gives her an accolade. She arrived full of shame. She leaves having been to the school prize day. Yeah? What's the term that he uses for her? Can you remember? Daughter. This is the story of two daughters. One, the prized daughter of the head of the synagogue. The other one, the prized daughter of God. Elevated. Seen as an example. So the difference between her and the crowd was her intentionality. Everyone else was brushing against him, but she touched him with faith. Yeah? There was a total difference. She had an intentionality in her touch. She was accessing who he was. It wasn't just another brush against. She was desperate and she was determined. And he elevates that position. Now let's look at Jairus. Okay, so Jairus was probably Mr. Popular. He was head of the synagogue. He was the guy that had everything. Yeah? The centre of the town, as I said, the head honcho. Look at your hand a minute. Just have a really good look. I'm about to give you some sober news about it. Have a good peep. One day that hand, unless the Lord comes again, will be the hand of a corpse. Sorry. Yeah? One day, this hand, let's bring ourselves up face to face with our mortality, will be the hand of a corpse. And Jairus, Mr. Popular, Mr. Successful, Mr. Centre of the town, when he was faced with the most precious thing he had being taken from him, could do nothing about it. His money, his success, the width of his shoulders, none of it was relevant. It didn't matter how Jewish he was, how successful he was, how everyone wanted to know him. The most precious thing that he valued was being taken away, and he could do nothing. Now, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the guys associated with the synagogues were not fond of Jesus. They had already started to speak out against him. But when it came to it, when faced with the fact that the hand of the little girl that he loved was becoming a corpse, he didn't care. Mr. Status literally flings himself as a hot mess in front of Jesus and says, please come and help. All that we have, all that we accumulate, all that we are seen to be, when push comes to shove, will not go. Is the phrase a ball of chalk? A funny thing. Have you ever seen a ball of chalk? Well, it doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. The only thing that matters can only be found in God, and he knows that. Fabulous. How do you think he feels at the moment where Jesus stops? They're on their way. He's got some hope. This miracle guy is going to come and see his little girl, and they stop while Jesus does some sort of inquest into some nobody who has apparently touched him. How do you think he feels at that point? Yeah, irritated, other words. Ticked off, yeah, right, yeah, ticked off. I mean, yeah, goes. Desperate. Absolutely desperate. And then he gets the news that he's been dreading. The guys say, too late. While he was dealing with was nobody, your little girl has died. Think of the disappointment. So close. Jesus was coming. Jesus heard him, was listening to him, was on his way, and he missed it. Sick. He must have felt sick. The word that Jesus says to him is very interesting. Jesus overheard what the guy said to Jairus and said, do not be afraid, just have faith. Actually, in the Greek, it's stronger than that. It is, do not yield to fear. Just the same as the Joshua 1:9 passage that you read this morning. Do not be overcome, do not yield to fear. So often, ladies and gentlemen, we will be told by Jesus to change our focus from the apparent disaster of our circumstances, or at least pressure of our circumstances, to look at him. And he's aware at that moment that Jairus would be very natural if he yielded to fear and was overwhelmed with anguish. And Jesus brings him up short and says, no, do not yield to fear, instead have faith. Now that's a sermon in itself. Fear or faith. But he stops the crowd, and he won't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John. Now, on the Jewish side of Lake Galilee, Jesus is actually quite shy about people knowing what he can do. he's quite modest at this moment about being proclaimed the Messiah. He's not wanting it. The other side, he doesn't really care, because they really don't know any better and they can all say whatever they want to about him. But on the Jewish side, he's quite cautious. So that might have been the reason that he says, only you three. Or it could have been that he actually wanted to keep faith. He wanted to take 3 people, demonstrate to them what he could do, and keep the faith level high in the room. Because when he gets there, I mean, not the most tactful thing. You've just got a little girl dead. Everyone's in a massive commotion. Jesus turns up and more or less says, why are you not moping? You know, wouldn't have been popular. They'd hired the official, if you like, commercial mourners. They were doing a huge hoo-ha, as was normal in Jewish society. The word that it is used for Jesus getting them out is ekbalo. And it literally means to expel or get rid of. It's a violent word normally used for demons. Yeah? Deliverance of demons, getting them out. He doesn't just politely say you might want to go do this somewhere else. He throws them out. He throws out that atmosphere. He literally ditches the natural world dominating. And he gets the room the way he wants it. He manicures, he cultivates, he curates the atmosphere around the little girl. Now, Talitha kum, what he says to the little girl, it's actually really tender and it's hard to translate in English. It could be translated as little lamb, sweetheart, if you like. It's not the cold, clinical Anglo-Saxon, little girl, would you like to stand up? Yeah? It's tender. It is warm. But in Numbers 19:11, it actually says that if you touch a dead body, which he was at the time, you're unclean for a week. And it says that Jesus seizes her, grabs her consciously, strongly, by the hand, aware that the life that is in him is so strong that that life will travel down her arm, into her heart, into her body. He is not going to be made unclean, she is going to be made whole. So that's twice he's had brushes with being unclean that afternoon, yeah? Once from the lady with the hemorrhage, and now from the dead body of the little girl. But he is so confident that the moment he touches her, she is no longer dead. Because there is so much life in him, the power of an indestructible life is coursing through him and completely changes her. Now, what can we learn from these incredible stories? I love them. I love his compassion for 2 sets of people in Capernaum that afternoon. If it was Capernaum, life has changed forever. One, powerful and important, full of status and significance. One, lady nobody, but has become lady somebody that afternoon. He changes, completely changes. Let's think about the humanity of these women's experience. That little girl was always going to know that she was the one that was brought back from death, that she had a life that she shouldn't have had, that nobody can say that Jesus wasn't good, that her dad and his family, his friends rather, nobody can say to Jairus that Jesus isn't good news. He knows what happened. It was sort of discreetly handled so that the rumours might not get out that she was completely dead. It could be packaged as a mistake, but the intimate family would know. The little girl would know. The woman would know. 12 years, no one touching her. I keep going on about this. Can you imagine it? 12 years, pain, weak. Everything changed in an instant. This amazing miracle-working healer says, daughter, daughter, you belong to me. You're mine now. You're daughter, daughter of the King. You're a princess. You've got status. You've got value. You've got worth. Your faith has healed you. Wow, well done. But the point I wanted to leave with us is perhaps a very simple one. I'm thinking of what they don't have in common. They have this 12-year story. But I want to end with what they do have in common. And that, people, is surely desperation. Desperation. Jairus knew that there was nothing that he could do. Nothing that he could do, his money could do, his status, his power, his wealth, his privilege, could for his daughter. He was desperate. He threw himself at Jesus' feet. He didn't care if his friends would say you shouldn't do that. At the time, it was very obvious to him what was important, not his status, not his position. He just needed what he needed. The lady, I don't know how she'd heard about Jesus, but she knew in her knower that he could help her. And she was utterly desperate because her life was not worth living as it was. And I want to leave us with that challenge. People, for God to use us, to touch us, to course through us, how desperate are we? Is it a nice to have? Like, I don't know, membership at the golf course? Is it a sort of nice accessory? I've got life pretty much the way I want it, and I can have some Jesus as well. Or is it everything that we are bankrupt without him? We have nothing of worth without him. Nothing matters, nothing is relevant, nothing is worth anything if we don't have him. In Romans 8, let me just turn to this. Oh, I'm going to do it from memory. I can't turn to it. It says, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead, this power that was coursing around his body, the power of an indestructible life, is also at work in us. Do we live as if that's true? Do we live as if that power is coursing within us? And not because of our goodness, but because of his indwelling presence, we touch all around lives and can make them well. We can give people hope. You know, going into work one morning a few weeks ago, there was a lady I just passed, and she gave me a glittering smile. And it changed my day. One lady's smile. She just looked at me sunny side up. And it made all the difference. Do we recognise that we carry something of that? That we can change people's days. The power of an indestructible life, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead, is living in you. Now, are we desperate for that power to work? Are we desperate to connect with him and to see his life released through us? Is it a nice to have, or is it the reason that we're living? Let's agree to make it the same.